Sorry?
Try to test the microphone?
I have to. Yeah, I've tried it. It worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just need to press the button and
Good morning, colleagues. I'm very happy to welcome you to the side event. How can SIDS harness capacity building for Article 6 cooperation? I'm seeing also that our colleagues are online who cannot make it today on the ground. So a very hearty welcome to Mari, May and Kaja. So this event is co-hosted by the government of Seychelles and our organization. My name is Axel Michaelowa. I'm working with Perspectives Climate Research and the University of Zurich, and I'm happy to lead you through this event. And without any further ado, I would welcome Wils Agricole, who is a special advisor of the Ministry of Agriculture, Climate Change and Energy of the Republic of Seychelles. We are very happy to have him in person, which was unexpected. So, Wils, you have the floor.
Thank you, Michael. A very good morning to you all. First of all, I want to convey the apology of His Excellency, the Minister Flavien Joubert, the Minister for Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment of the Republic of Seychelles, who after spending the first week at this COP, unfortunately cannot be with us in person today at this side event. However, His Excellency Mr. Flavien Joubert is however with us in spirit and assure everyone of the Republic of Seychelles continuing leadership and commitment to join like-minded partners in strongly and decisively in combating this climate crisis. On my side, it is a profound pleasure for me to be here at COP27 and at this side event. I want to begin by thanking Perspective Climate Research of the University of Zurich for organizing today's event jointly with the government of Seychelles. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is generally known as the market article. While broadly correct, it could more properly be called the article on international cooperation. A number of provisions address specific instances of cooperation that involve using internationally transferred mitigation outcomes towards meeting the nationally determined contribution of countries and creating a framework for building international carbon markets and a framework for non-carbon approaches to international cooperation. At the UN United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow last November, the rules related to Article 6 were adopted. The adoption ensures that Paris Agreement is fully operational and its unique combination of both market and non-market approaches will support both efforts to curb greenhouse gas emission and to build resilience. The rules are highly technical. The benefits, however, are clear. For example, the rules provide the groundwork to help unlock resources on support for developing nations. This is important for small and developing states like Seychelles and other developing countries, and especially least developed countries. And after all, many do not currently have the means of resources necessary to energize an economy-wide transition towards a low-emission future. With Article 6, Seychelles and all other parties can both raise ambition to fight climate change, and this is what we are doing, and this is what we intend to continue doing, which is crucial to achieve the Paris Agreement's central goal of holding global average rise temperature to as close as possible to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and implement our national climate action plans, or NDCs, far more cheaply. According to some organizations, Article 6 has the potential to halve the cost of implementing national climate action plans. This could save quite a substantial amount of billion US dollars annually by 2030 alone. Very significantly, Article 6 can be a source of climate finance for developing nations, with a share of proceeds going towards effort to green rapidly growing economies and to build resilience to the innovative impact of climate change. And as a result, there is the necessity to roll out the capacity building support for this type of work. This is important for developing countries, and especially least developed countries and small island developing states. After all, many do not currently have the means or resources necessary to energize an economy-wide transition towards a low-emission future. It is about leveling the playing field so that emission can be traded with environmental integrity, and for SIDS like Seychelles, let's get more sustainable development projects off the ground. And also it's about getting all nations to move together towards a low-emission trajectory, and all this required a reliable and effective manpower. Yet, we know capacities need to be further strengthened through trainings, technical inputs, publication, and communication. That's why at this COP, it is extremely important because it provides an excellent opportunity to identify capacity needs from developing countries, particularly in the small island developing states. These include, of course, countries like Seychelles that do not have the capacity to fulfill all the requirements specified in the finalized rulebook from Glasgow. Side events as this one, as well as others to follow in future, will play a major role in building capacity for nations to use Article 6 as a way to assist the implementation of NDCs and to boost climate ambition. Finally, I propose that the UNFCCC organizes regional dialogue on Article 6 capacity building needs that will focus on the relevance of COP26 and COP27 outcomes, including CDM transition, and to understand and identify capacity building needs regarding participation requirement for all aspects of Article 6, and to allow for parties to meaningfully engage in CDM transaction and provide information for decision-making, including policy and planning for the development of the work program to implement capacity building in the country. So by organizing this workshop, countries will benefit as follows. We'll share capacity building needs to shape the work plan for Article 6. It will improve awareness of COP26 and COP27 key decisions on Article 6 and its impact on CDM. It will understand capacity building needs for fulfilling participation requirement for Article 6 and the transition from CDM to Article 6.4. And it will also share global capacity building needs identified by parties and stakeholders to advance collaboration. Finally, I would like to thank Perspective for this support to help build this crucial institutional and technical capacity for implementation of Article 6 in SIDS. As you all know, Article 6 is a key tool to boost climate adaptation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Wills. We highly appreciate the governments of Seychelles' engagement in Article 6 and other innovative climate finance mechanisms. I would ask the technical staff to bring back the slides on all the screens because I would just now want to set the scene for the event as a whole. So the small island states in the past have been actually bypassed from the international carbon markets. We've seen a few instances in the Latin American region where the Dominican Republic has been quite engaged in the CDM. We've seen Papua New Guinea in the Pacific engaged in a few projects also in the context of forestry. And we have seen various cook stove programs in island states around the world. But all of those are on small scale, and what we would have hoped for, the breakthrough of renewable energy harnessed through international carbon markets, that actually didn't happen. And therefore, we think that now under Article 6, it's important that the small island states get their rightful place in these mechanisms, and that with the right way of capacity building engagement, these states can play a significant role of international carbon markets. We see already some promising signs that in Dominica, the Dominican Republic, and Vanuatu, Article 6 pilots are actually seeing the light of the day. And later today, there will be a side event in the same room, co-hosted by the government of Dominica, which will also raise this issue. So what of course is crucial in the context of the capacity building is that the governments play a much larger role than under the CDM. Under the CDM, you only needed an approval letter. Now you need to understand what is your NDC, what is the potential of low-cost mitigation, how do you do the corresponding adjustment, how do you ensure that the baselines and crediting periods are appropriate to a national situation. So that means one needs to really engage in a well-defined Article 6 strategy. And here you see on this graph the Article 6 strategy elements that a country will have. I will not go into the nitty-gritties of that. Can you also bring up the slides on the left-hand side that the people can see them on both screens? I think we don't need to see the virtual participants on both screens. So yeah, please bring up the slides on both sides. So we'll of course provide these slides for you on the UNFC side event website for you to have a look later on. And now of course when it comes to our activity today, and I hope that technology actually does work, we see a very important role for South-South collaboration. And we've seen the first instances of this in Africa, and later we will have a presentation on the West and East African Alliance for Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, because we think that many states share the same features. And so the pioneers can actually play an important role in spreading the understanding of what works and what does not work. And especially in the context of small island developing states, we have strong regional institutions. We also have AOSIS. So that of course means that there is a good potential for actually engaging in the sharing of experiences on the basis of those institutions. So today we've already heard the welcoming statement of Wils Agricole. We will continue with Christian Fleischer, who is a Seychelles national and working with Perspectives Climate Research on transferring Article 6 knowledge from Africa to Caribbean small island developing states. There are promising initiatives just developing. Then we will have Marie-May Jeremie from SEICAT. SEICAT is one of the most innovative financing institutions. It actually has been financed through a debt for climate swap, so a precursor activity where the Seychelles really lead the world in terms of innovation. Then we will have Kaja Weldner from Perspectives Climate Research, who will describe the experiences that these African regional collaborations have been brought. And then we'll showcase an initiative where we develop Article 6 methodology tools that enable to overcome the so-called valley of death that could exist if Article 6.4 would have to develop methodologies from scratch. And of course, also this initiative aims at Article 6.2 collaborations. And then afterwards, we'll get into a discussion with you as audience, hopefully also the virtual audience, and I'm really looking forward to that. And without further ado, I would invite Christian to come with his presentation on the Article 6 transfer from Africa to the Caribbean. So Christian, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Axel, for your remarks. And yes, thank you, Axel, and Uzagrigo for your opening remarks. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today, talking about Article 6. And my topic is specifically looking at Africa-Caribbean Regional Cooperation and dialogue on Article 6 capacity building, and looking at opportunities for South-South cooperation. The agenda is quite brief. I will talk on challenges for SIDS in carbon markets. I will talk on the experiences in Africa and the regional cooperation that can meet these challenges in accessing carbon markets for SIDS. I will lay out some practical relevance for the individual articles 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8. And finally, then briefly go through some mobilizing finance for implementation. Now, challenges for SIDS in carbon markets. This is something that's well documented. Transaction costs outweigh expected benefits, and this relates to how small-scale projects were over-proportionally high transaction costs and generate relatively low volume of carbon credits. Next, there is limited experience. SIDS have limited experience in carbon markets. There's a handful of larger SIDS states that have the experience, but the smaller states have not participated. And due to this low number of activities, there's limited local capacity in SIDS, with few local experts that are working in the sector and that can actually develop bankable activities. Now we look at some of specific items that affect SIDS, and that is SIDS are limited in finance in terms of the budget and debt ceiling that restrict investment into capital-intensive projects. There is also budget constraints. The budget is being used for adaptation, and we also have the case that SIDS have conditional NDC targets, but do not have the necessary access to financial support to implement targets listed in the NDCs. Now, looking at the experiences in Africa, in the past, Africa initially had a low participation in carbon markets. That is clear, and it's displayed in the graph, where you have a 3% participation in terms of single CDM projects. And due to substantial reform and with the introduction of POAs, programmatic activities, we now see, and also comprehensive capacity building in these countries, we now see a much larger share of participation of the African region in the carbon market. And now Africa is also well represented in different piloting projects related to Article 6. So we previously saw this graphic, but what I'm trying to relay with this slide is that Article 6 participation is complex, and this relates also to the fact that it is linked to different responsibilities, including NDC accounting and reporting. Now, looking at the host countries, they need to establish, obviously, new institutional frameworks for participation, and given their previous experience, they will benefit from peer-to-peer exchange in regional cooperation. Sorry. Now, as we look into sort of the practical relevance of Article 6, specifically now first Article 6.2, peer exchange will be critical because within sub-regions, even in Africa and in the Caribbean, we can harmonize key features, talking about NDC accounting and reporting. We now see there's bilateral cooperation that is already kickstarted in this sector. Senegal and Switzerland have agreements and corporations, Ghana and Switzerland. And in the Caribbean SIDS context, we have the Dominican Republic that has bilateral cooperation with Switzerland. And in 6.2, we also talk about the voluntary carbon market. And there's obviously good experience in VCM standards, talking about code standard in Vera, where there are large portfolios of activities in that sector, especially when we look at the forest sector. And what is very important for SIDS is the blue economy agenda, which then pulls in a lot of different activities that are happening in these countries. And for example, we have mangroves and seagrass. In the context of this discussion, we see that Seychelles has already spearheaded some activities there. We're doing some mapping of the mangrove and the seagrass carbon stocks. Now talking about 6.4 mechanism, we have obviously the CDM transition, and although there's limited CDM activities in SIDS, we can pull from the activities in Africa and see how these transitions occur there, especially to the existing CDM activities that can be transitioned towards 6.4, and these countries will have to decide on them. But looking at new projects, building on POAs and programmatic activities experience, in particular decentralized renewable energy solutions. We see potential in off-grid productive use of renewable energies like solar water pumping that can bring benefits to communities even in the agricultural sector. And we also see potential in transforming the economies of these countries in terms of looking at e-mobility and green hydrogen. These are emerging technologies that can have a real impact for SIDS. Looking at the practical relevance in 6.8, non-market approaches, we also think there's increasing need to scale up in these activities here in terms of to help with mitigation, but also supporting adaptation and resilience in SIDS. 6.8 is also a key instrument to pioneering relevant activities, looking at further capacity building and investment mobilization that is critically needed in these countries to deal with the impacts of climate change. Finally, I will talk on mobilizing finance for implementation. The first point is, and it's a key message here, SIDS need, it's integral that there's technical and financial assistance. For practical activities, as we see, it is most effective to do capacity building by doing training on the job, as we say. We also see coordinated development partners and carbon buyer outreach will help small islands access finance. We see experience exchange, peer-to-peer exchange on best practices, developing business models and new technologies that can be shared across the different island states. Finally, when looking at multi-country programs, we think there's definitely potential there to help deliver mitigation at scale, so replicate these different activities in different countries. Yeah, that's basically my slides, and yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Christian. I would ask whether there are any questions for clarifications from the floor. I'm not seeing any clarification. Yes, please. Just clarification, no general comment, please. Do we have a roving mic?
Yes, you talked about non-market approaches. Could you just give maybe some examples of what they may look like?
Yeah, so non-market approaches, this is something that's still being developed and discussed now, but there are some activities in terms of capacity building, technology transfer. I mean, some countries are already preparing their technical national assessments, so they are identifying already the needs. So those are some examples that I can list.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please give your name and institution before intervening.
Fiona Ryan from Forest Development and Climate in Australia. I was just wondering, you know, they talk a lot about where the sources of funds are coming from. You know, the Europeans, the Americans, the Canadians, the UK have all said they're going to meet all their targets at home. So for 2030, so that would mean that they're not going to use any Article 6 credits before 2030, I imagine, and that leaves the Swiss who...
Sorry, I would like to really only have clarification questions. We have a general discussion later. So please focus on clarifications.
Well, where do you see the funding coming from? I didn't see that in the sample, where the actual funds come from for 6.2, 6.4 and 6.8.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, and I will maybe leave that later for the discussion, because it's quite relevant to the discussion. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thanks. So I see no further clarification questions, so I would now invite Marie, May, Jeremie to come in remotely. Marie, you have the floor. Marie, we can't hear you. Can you bring microphone of the virtual speakers, please?
Let me know once you are able to hear me.
Yes, now we hear you perfectly. We see your slides. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So good morning to everyone, all the panelists and participants to the event. So just to start off by thanking the organizers, Christian and team, for inviting us to speak. It's a pleasure, even if we're joining you all remotely. So I'm Magni, and I am the CEO for the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. And following on from the two previous speakers that have spoken before me, I will be diving into a little bit more detail about the work that the Trust is doing with regards to blue carbon in the Seychelles. So like Ms. Sagikol mentioned alone, as SIDS, it is quite difficult for us to achieve all of the targets and the NDC commitments that we've made. And here we want to highlight some of the collaborative approaches that we're working on, and also in some of the ways that we have been exploring to overcome some of the challenges that Christian has just gone over. So just before I dive in, I want us to, I just want to set the scene a little bit around what SECAT is and what are the enabling factors which makes it ideal for us to play the sort of role that we're currently playing in Seychelles for blue carbon. So we are an independent public-private trust that was established by law in 2015 in order to facilitate the debt conversion for the Seychelles government that was brokered by TNC. In essence, we needed to be an independent entity that had both public and private sector representation. So on our board, we have this kind of overarching stakeholder representation. We have a finance and grants committee as well that makes recommendation to the board for endorsements. We have structured loans. We have a structure for grants, that looks beyond just loans and investment. So the way that the SECAT is built, we get our revenue or the source of finance from the debt for nature swap, as well as from the sovereign blue bonds that the Seychelles launched in 2018. So to these funds, we administer a blue grants mechanism that disperses around $700,000 US per year, and starting next year, it would be looking more around $1.2 million. So SECAT has an overarching mandate, really, of raising resources to support the establishment and implementation of the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan, that then in turn incorporates raising of resources to support conservation, sustainable fisheries, climate adaptation and mitigation, as well as other blue economy initiatives. So now coming back to the topic at hand, so in regards to the role that we've been playing in supporting the government in relation to its commitments internationally, and also how these translate down to actions in the country. So SECAT supported the government in including aspects of mitigation and adaptation within the NDC that was finalized last year. And along those other commitments, really it encapsulates some of the efforts that we've put around the Marine Spatial Plan in designating 30% of our EZ as protected areas, but also at some looking more specifically at the blue carbon commitments that the country has made towards mangrove and seagrass ecosystems in the Seychelles. And one of the key things that we've been working a lot on in the past couple of years has been around ensuring that blue carbon establishes its space within how the country moves ahead with its directives around blue carbon credits. And to do that, this is how we have worked on collaborations to map out the seagrass meadows in the Seychelles. So I'm going to focus in the next couple of slides on some of our specific efforts relating to the seagrass work that the SECAT has been working with, along with a lot of partners, including government. So how did we do the projects? So we supported government through a Pew Charitable Trust funded project that started in 2020. So the first phase ended in June this year, and it has focused a lot on seagrass blue carbon. So what did we do in that project? We had a very strong scientific component that for the first time included hands-on ground truthing work to do seagrass mapping in the country, and that included collection of data to understand seagrass stocks, estimates that the stock's carbon sequestration capacities are, and also to map out all of the geographical coverage of seagrasses across the Seychelles exclusive economic zone. So this has been very interesting work because it has opened up, I guess, a lot of opportunities for the Seychelles government in what it can do in the future on blue carbon. So the preliminary data seems to show that there is quite a significant capacity for carbon sequestration, and this, of course, is still being refined. The final results will be forthcoming, but we've seen, probably you would have seen in other side events at the COP with our partners, Pew Charitable Trust and also University of Oxford, some of the preliminary results that's come out of that process. Of course, all of this information is belonging to government of Seychelles, and that is really helping to position Seychelles in a good space. So we've done a lot of work in country as well to sort of build capacity with the locals to understand what seagrass is, what it can mean in terms of its benefit for ecosystem services, as well as its capacity to mitigate and adapt to climate change, which I think is really been well received so far, and that is something that as SECAT will be working on in subsequent phases of the project. So since then, we've been able to continue working with our partners, and now that we're having the maps coming out and we're seeing what is there, we want to focus in socializing these validated maps, making sure that people truly understand what it means. And we want to do that by helping to inform the development of a national policy framework for Seychelles. So in order for Seychelles to fully utilize and also do it in a way that is smart, it has to be able to have clear policy guidelines around what it wants to do with the newfound information. And also we'll be looking to have a clear implementation strategy for how we go about with the delivering on the NDC coastal wetland commitments, particularly for the protection targets that are in the NDC. But more importantly, and I think the key role that SECAT really wants to enter in is looking at the revenue generating possibilities of the seagrass that are found within our EZ. So we are currently exploring with partners, and we will have some preliminary work that we will be completing early next year, which we'll be presenting to government, that will be exploring those innovating financing mechanisms for blue carbon. And we are currently looking at multilateral and bilateral funds. We're exploring insurance products, debt for nature swaps, potentially another one, we don't know. We're still considering the viability of those, private investments, blue carbon credits and bonds, which we know there's a lot of interest, and other innovative conservation financing mechanisms, all of which we're now able to explore further because we've done some of the preliminary assessments to know what we have and the possibilities that they have in terms of mitigation. Simultaneously, we are keeping a close eye on non-market approaches that we know are likely to be effective for us. And Christian mentioned a few before, but we are also working with our partners to see how best we are able to guide government in that. Foreseeable needs. As part of this work, of course, we've done a lot of the preliminary assessments, but there still needs to be a lot more science and research, and this is where the capacity comes in. Whilst we have been able to train some of the local people, local scientists, to be more engaged as part of the process for blue carbon, there is still quite a big gap in terms of ensuring the sustainability of the research capacities of Seychelles as a SIDS, and therefore that remains one of the core elements. To have more precise data, to have greater understanding of the seagrass species, and also in their management, because whilst we are exploring those financial benefits that can come out of these ecosystems, we do recognize that they have a lot of capacities for providing on its own the ecosystem services that support the livelihoods of the Seychelles. Secondly, more awareness raising. This is something that we feel has to come out a lot, especially through the socialization efforts that we've done, and even now exploring how to get people locally to become more sensitized around the financial mechanisms to attract as well private sector into the whole process, to have something a little bit more overarching from the country, and that is really cross-sectoral, and that touches all of the society. And of course, necessity to charge consecutive steps for the blue carbon credits, which is something that we feel has a lot of potential. So we want to have a proper seagrass-based blue carbon value chain that is established for the Seychelles. I think I will leave it there, and of course, I can take any questions after or in the general discussions that will follow. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-May. I would invite clarification questions as we did in the previous presentation, but the general discussion would follow afterwards. So, any clarification question for Marie-May? I'm not seeing any clarification questions, so I would now invite Kaja to come in virtually as well. Kaja, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Axel. Do you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Do you have my presentation, or should I bring it up? I cannot share my screen, so I would like to ask the floor to bring up my presentation. We can
bring it up, no worry, it's coming.
Thank you very much. I will take this opportunity to talk about regional alliances as tool for Article 6 capacity building, and I will speak about, in this context, the Eastern African Alliance for Carbon Markets and Climate Finance and the West African Alliance for Carbon Markets.
Now we are losing Kaja, sorry, you're cut off. One moment, please. Sorry for the technical problem. Kaja, can you speak?
Yes, I can speak. Do let me know if I should continue. Otherwise, I will just go ahead without the slides.
Well, we apparently can't combine slides with the microphone of the virtual speaker. Can you try to bring in the slides but still retain the microphone of the virtual speaker, please? Kaja, can you try to share your screen yourself? Apparently it's not possible to have the slides from our side and hear you at the same time.
Okay. It is not possible for me. I don't think I have the right to do this, but in order not to lose any time on this, I would suggest that I just go ahead and hold my presentation without the slide support, and they will be shared later, so I invite everyone to have a look at them. But I think I'm good to go ahead, speaking freely now.
Good, go ahead,
So,
please.
yeah. To start again, I will talk about the West African Alliance for Carbon Markets and Climate Finance and the Eastern African Alliance for Carbon Markets and Climate Finance as capacity building tools. And I will share some experiences from those alliances, which I think really take up points on the challenges and the needs that we have already heard by previous speakers in the context also of SIDS. And I wanted to start my presentation by briefly taking up a few points on Article 6 capacity building, and then really focusing on how regional alliances address different dimensions and the complexity of Article 6 capacity building, really. In the second part of my presentation, I will zoom in a bit on the West African Alliance. Maybe I'll keep that brief, and then bring in a few key takeaways, which I think are relevant also for SIDS. So we've heard it before, Article 6 readiness is really complex. It means to establish a structure and a knowledge base to take full advantage of cooperation under Article 6, market-based or non-market-based. And that really has a lot of dimensions, which we have already heard. Establishing organizational structures and institutional responsibilities, building awareness and knowledge bases, thinking about relationship to the NDC, and also engaging with international cooperation partners and engaging in the carbon market rule-setting process. In the
Kaja, sorry for interrupting you, but it seems that we now have an option where you can show the slides. Your picture is not shown, but we will hear you. So let's try it out, because I still think we have a bit of spare time and optimize technology here on the side. So, yeah.
Yes, happy to do that. Please let me know what I should do. I still cannot share my screen.
The technology people are apparently working now. Yeah, can you try to share now?
No, it still doesn't show.
Okay, well, let's now wait. They are doing something.
Thank you, Axel. Please let me know when I can continue.
So, can you try again?
Not possible. I'm receiving there's a message in the chat, so I will wait for instructions.
No, they write you could be sharing. Can you try again?
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's still not working. Well, the share screen button is not enabled, so that's why I'm still having issues. Am I?
Well, let's try again for 1-2 minutes.
I am not
if it doesn't,
as a
if it doesn't,
so I think this should be the issue. If you could make me a presenter instead of an attendee, I think I would be able to share my screen. Now.
Does it work now, Kaja?
Yes, it
Good,
works.
please go ahead.
Then let me bring. Do you see my
we
slides
see
now?
the circle diagram. It works.
Yes, great.
Good, please continue. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so let me take off again with this slide, which mainly wants to reiterate a few things that have been said by colleagues before. Mostly that Article 6 readiness is really a complex process for countries to establish structures and the knowledge base in order to be able to take full advantage of Article 6. It has many dimensions and enabling factors, and it requires, a lot of political weight and resources that need to be made available to be able to get there on the national level. And I want to, in countries of the West African and the East African Alliance, I think they face, many of them face a similar situation than what we were talking about in the context of SIDS before. And I think the West African and the East African alliances are great tools to help address some of the challenges and the needs that countries have when they are talking about Article 6 readiness. So if you want to summarize it, I think regional alliances really can, address Article 6 readiness or help countries address Article 6 readiness in at least 4 ways. And the first one is by pooling resources and knowledge and enable mutual exchange and peer-to-peer exchange and mutual learning. We already heard about this as well. And I want to give a few examples from the West African and East African Alliance. For example, in the context of the East African Alliance, perspectives as a technical partner together with other technical partners has developed carbon market country profiles, which are a really key resource for national decision makers to use this knowledge product and take it into account in their decision making. In the context of the West African Alliance, we have developed a blueprint document which is designed to be like a practitioner's guide, hopefully, for members of the alliance, and address questions on how do you implement Article 6, and I hope that I can talk about this in a bit more detail if there is time. Regional alliances also help to raise awareness and build momentum for carbon markets and Article 6 in the region. On the picture to the right, you see a snapshot from a workshop that the East African Alliance organized with East African private sector. And also in the West African Alliance, there is a process going on right now to follow the example of Ghana and try to mobilize really, or make high levels of government aware of the opportunities and really create that momentum around Article 6 and carbon markets. I think another key point is that the regional alliances, both in West and Eastern Africa, have enabled effective participation in the rule development for Article 6. So the West African Alliance is supporting the participation of its members, its focal points in the COPs and the SB sessions for a few years now, and also organizing workshops to understand what will be decided and what the positioning on this can be ahead of the COPs. Similarly, in the East African Alliance, in 2019, I think, a Article 6 negotiators handbook was developed and published, and I think that was a great resource for the negotiators from East Africa. And also on the picture to the right, you see a workshop that was organized in collaboration with Perspectives on corresponding adjustments. And the last point, which is really not least, I think, is that the alliances facilitate outreach to international partners. Both alliances have a really impressive network of international partners ranging from regional organizations to international development partners, also bilateral partners like Germany, Switzerland, and this really helps. Well, in one way, you know, for the member countries to get a better overview and access to the resources of those partners, but also, you know, the other way around, to be able to have a regional, to communicate regional needs in kind of a consolidated manner to those partners. So I think all of these aspects are really important, and as I said, I think they address or they show from practice how a few of the challenges and needs that were raised before can be addressed. With the next slides, I just want to very briefly zoom in on the West African Alliance, both on a structure and one of its key activities. And I mean, I don't want to go into the very details of this graph here now, but I wanted to highlight that really this alliance is a regionally driven exercise, you know. In the steering committee, you have the coordinator, the secretariat, and financing partner, the national focal points and technical partners represented equally. So that makes, you know, a very balanced committee for strategic guidance. And on the implementation level, the coordinator is Ousmane Falsa from Senegal. The secretariat is also hosted in Senegal by Enda Energy. And the financial partner is the West African Development Bank. And then, of course, you have the national focal points. So it's really, on the implementation and strategic level, very much driven by the needs and the vision of the region. And when we're talking about activities, I cannot present like the full package because there are really a lot. But I want to highlight the what we call the blueprint process as an example for many of the ways in which the alliance or a regional alliance can support countries. The starting point for this process was 1 year ago, I would say, where we were facing a situation that we have in the West African Alliance 16 member countries, and all of them would like to have, you know, receive, in a way, also tailored support for implementing Article 6. But at the same time, of course, the alliance has limited resources. So there was really a long thought exercise. How can we ensure that nobody is left behind, and at the same time use our resources in a smart way? And what we came up with was this blueprint process, which consists of a publication that was launched in June at the SB, which is this Article 6 readiness blueprint. And the objective of this document really is to break down the Article 6 rulebook into pieces of information that the members of the alliance can use in their national contexts. But it is on the regional level, and this is accompanied on the regional level by a workshop series where we want to deepen the discussions on the elements of the blueprint, the elements of Article 6 readiness. And we also want to understand better, for example, as technical partners, what is the feedback and where is more information needed so that we can, you know, go back into the section and publish another version that addresses the feedback and the needs of the focal points even better. But this is only the regional component. Together with this, we are thinking with those countries who have expressed their wish to be supported by the alliance and have indicated what they need support on. We support them individually, and we have agreed on so-called readiness support plans with a few of them. And of course, these are quite individual and address the specific needs of the country that cannot be addressed, you know, on the regional level in a similar format for all the countries. So, for example, in Burkina Faso, we're now thinking about, for the country specifically, how could a transition of their CDM projects look like? And for this, of course, we coordinate with other partners outside of the alliance in the country to make sure that we really do not duplicate any efforts and that we create a maximum of synergies. I want to finish with a few key takeaways which I think could be interesting for SIDS. Well, first of all, by saying that I really think that these regional alliances, like the West and Eastern African one, are a key tool to address all dimensions of Article 6 capacity building, and to do so in a country or regionally driven manner. And I also want to highlight that the alliances have started on the regional level with building capacities and fostering, like Christian said, this peer-to-peer exchange, and have been able to gradually broaden their activities, and like in the example of the West African alliances, now even supports countries at the national level. I think strategic partnerships are really key, and I want to highlight here the link that both alliances have with the RCCs. Both the BOAD and the Eastern African Development Bank host the RCCs, and I think this link is also really important for both alliances. And one last point, because I've talked a lot about what alliances can do to support capacity building of their member countries, but of course the mutual learning also happens in between the alliances, and there is a great amount of exchange on this level as well, which I think is also really really conducive to bringing this exercise further and thinking about how we can improve South-South cooperation and improve Article 6 capacity building. And with this, I hope I have not taken away too much time given the technical issues, and I hand back to you, Axel, to the room. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kaja, for braving the technical challenges. Are there any clarification questions from our participants? I'm not seeing any, so I would now then ask Ayushi to come in on the International Initiative for Article 6 Methodology Tools. Ayushi, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Axel. If we could have the slides up, that would be great. Okay, we have it on one side.
Yes, it's working, Ayushi.
All right. So I'll
go.
begin. Thank you, Axel. Building on what the other speakers have said so far, I would like to highlight again that Article 6 is a very important tool, one of the important tools for the achievement of host country NDCs. And an important part of Article 6 capacity building is understanding how to operationalize the principles and guardrails of the Article 6 rulebook and reflect them in methodology development. In my presentation today, I will delve deeper into one initiative that is advancing methodological work and trying to align itself and its work with the rules, modalities, and procedures of the Article 6.4 mechanism. And it's the International Initiative for the Development of Article 6 Methodology Tools, or IIAMT in short. The conceptualization or the idea of this initiative came with the realization that we have over 250 baseline and monitoring methodologies under the CDM, as well as 33 related tools that are currently approved. And not just in the CDM context, they're also relevant in many carbon market mechanisms worldwide. This is an important body of literature that allows for projects and programs to generate emission reductions credits. So just because there has been a new rulebook adopted at Glasgow, it does not mean that we need to discard this existing wealth of knowledge. Instead, we should be focusing on trying to transition this tool from CDM to make them fit for Paris Agreement. So just to quickly highlight what the difference is in methodological requirements under the CDM and joint implementation as compared to the Paris Agreement era. Here we've illustrated that if you see on the left side, we have the old principles related to methodological requirement under the Kyoto mechanisms. And under that, methodologies were required to take into account uncertainty, leakage, relevant circumstances, transparency, conservativeness, credibility, recognition of suppressed demand, and addressal of reversals. Now, the new principles go beyond these requirements that were enshrined in the Kyoto mechanisms. For instance, methodology requirements now need to encourage ambition over time. They must align with the long-term temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. They need to contribute to reducing emission of host parties, as well as align with its NDC and long-term low-emission development strategies. The baselines need to be set in a way that they're below business as usual. Now, methodology development need to take policies and measures into account and contribute to equitable sharing of mitigation benefits. Coming back to the initiative that I had introduced earlier, the initiative launched earlier this year in January aims to provide a robust yet pragmatic approach to the transition of CDM methodologies to make them fit for Paris and Article 6. The objective of the initiative is alignment of approved CDM baseline and monitoring methodologies with the Article 6 rules and principles, and this is done in the initiative through the development of Article 6 methodology tools, and these can be added to or grafted upon CDM methodologies that have been currently approved to enable rapid application of methodologies under Article 6. So the illustration here tries to provide an understanding of what the initiative is trying to do. We have the vast wealth of knowledge from the CDM methodologies of over 15 years of experience within them. And we have the value of death, which was introduced, or you could refer to it as the stringent principles of the Article 6.4 rules, modalities, and procedures. So without a transition process, these CDM methodologies would fall into the valley of death and would not be used anymore. But that is just a waste of this vast wealth of knowledge, and what the initiative tries to do is it tries to build this bridge from transitioning the CDM methodologies to the Article 6.4 methodologies, thereby preventing this death of the CDM methodologies, as well as preventing new methodologies to be developed from scratch, because it's a time-consuming process as well as a very expensive exercise. So the initiative is led by a group of international experts who have expertise in methodological development, and it follows an independent approach. This does not represent interests of certain Article 6 stakeholders. However, the initiative is open and it tries to be transparent and inclusive, and throughout its process of developing the concept notes and the tools, we have had an iterative approach where we have consulted with experts and advisors in the Article 6 sphere. Talking about the outputs of the initiative, so earlier in the first quarter of the year, we developed the experts developed the concept notes. And while developing the concept notes and discussing them with relevant stakeholders and experts, the expert group found the basis to develop the draft tools on demonstration of additionality, on baseline setting, on monitoring, reporting, and verification of emission and emission reductions, as well as an NDC guidance document. And these documents build on well-known and existing principles for carbon crediting, such as accuracy, conservativeness, and consistency. These documents operationalize both the Article 6.2 guidance as well as the rules, modalities, and procedures of the Article 6.4 mechanism. And we try to be as conservative in our approach in the tools as possible by adhering to both shall as well as should requirements. Now, what I would like to highlight here is that the tools that we're developing are at a project or activity or program level. They do not cover sectoral or policy level interventions. However, we have the NDC guidance, which allows host countries to understand the link of the activity with its target, the NDC target, and understand where the mitigation activity falls, whether it falls under conditional or the unconditional targets, and understand the implications thereof. Also, I would like to highlight that the tools are sector and technology agnostic, which means that at present, activity-specific considerations are not yet incorporated in the tool. However, in the medium to long term, the experts may be open to including activity-specific considerations. Due to brevity, I will only highlight the key elements of the 3 tools that I mentioned earlier, the baseline, additionality, and MRV tools. So in the baseline tools, along with the steps that are presented, one of the key elements based off the rules, modalities, and procedures of the 6.4 mechanism is that the guidance document, or the RMPs, specify 3 performance-based approaches for setting baselines. And our experts have recommended a hierarchy approach to methodology selection, and this is based on the data intensiveness of the options. So, for instance, if we have a sector that is characterized by homogeneous production, then we recommend the application of the best available technology methodology for baseline setting. And if not, then we recommend the second option, which is the it's the benchmark approach. And finally, if there is no data available, then we recommend the use of the existing or historical emissions adjusted downwards. Also, with regards to this adjusting downwards and aligning the carbon markets with the Paris Agreement's long-term goals, the experts propose the application of the Paris goal coefficient, and this is a novel concept that is now being also discussed in the Article 6.4 supervisory body meetings as the baseline contraction factor curve, wherein this coefficient is applied to the baseline emissions intensity, and this is linearly decreasing over time. So it linearly decreases your baseline emissions intensity to a point of 0 as soon as the host country approaches its net zero target. With regards to additionality, one of the key pre-steps that the experts have included in the tool to try to ease the application of the methodology is that after determination of regulatory additionality, there is a pre-step, which is the evaluation of inherent financial additionality risk of the activity type. And this is done to ensure that the assumptions that are being used by the activity developers are relevant as in comparison to the risk of the financial risk. So if we have, if the financial additionality risk is low, then the activity is eligible for global positive lists for financial additionality. However, if the risk is between I don't know, medium to high, then we recommend the application of an investment analysis step for that process. Finally, for the MRV tool, we have several elements based on the Article 6 rulebook that we consider in the tool, but one of the key elements is the element of conservativeness and how to balance that with accuracy. We know that conservativeness and accuracy are competing principles, and in trying to achieve the best possible level of conservativeness, we can be inaccurate with our measurements. However, on the other hand, if we're chasing accuracy, the highest possible level of accuracy, this can be a very expensive exercise for activity developers. So what we suggest in the tool is a layered approach, wherein the activity developers should apply the accuracy principle at the highest level until there are prohibitive costs. Once the prohibitive costs come up, then we ask the activity developers to balance it with the concept of conservativeness, wherein we say, okay, you can take a less accurate approach, but it means that emissions need to be overestimated and removals need to be underestimated. The tools, the draft tools that we have developed will be launched for public consultation later today. On the initiative's website, the link is on your screens here. And we look forward to receiving constructive feedback and input from all of you on the tools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ayushi. Are there any clarification questions directly to that presentation? I'm not seeing, so I would now like to invite for a general discussion of all the presentations you've heard today. We still have about 10 minutes to go. You've seen a wide array of inputs regarding how small island developing states can participate in Article 6, what are challenges, what are opportunities. So yeah, the floor is open. I think there's the roving mic is still somewhere. So maybe Christian, could you operate the mic with the audience and we get into the discussion? We have the first question here. Christian, the mic is with the audience already.
Oh.
Good, yes, please, you have the floor, and please give name and institution before you speak.
Thank you very much. Lars Kvele, Blue Carbon Projects. We develop blue carbon projects in the Caribbean. And I thought those were very good presentations. So first of all, thank you to all of the panelists. Christian, when you spoke, you mentioned the transaction cost for carbon projects in the Caribbean and Africa and small countries and SIDS, which is a real issue and has been a real issue for why carbon projects have not developed. So I then take the question to Ayushi, which is you're updating the methodologies from CDM to 6.4. Are you taking that into account? How do we reduce transaction costs of doing projects to actually help solve for that? Thank you.
Right. So with the tools that we are using as an add-on to existing CDM methodologies, the way we're trying to reduce transaction costs is to keep the CDM methodologies as is, and then add this additional element on top of the CDM methodologies to make sure that the principles of Article 6 are fulfilled. So in that sense, we have our knowledge base of the CDM still intact, which reduces the transaction costs of having to understand a new methodology from scratch. And to apply these Article 6 principles, we have laid down steps and examples and which facilitate understanding and reducing the costs of having to transition or having to develop a methodology straight from scratch again. That is the idea of our initiative. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you, Ayushi. Next, yes, please, over there.
Hi, my name is Javon Sands. I'm a student researcher. I guess this is open to any of the panelists, but what are your thoughts on how carbon markets could possibly be exploited for SIDS? And we'll have to be doing the work of these carbon projects. And as we just talked about, there are all these limitations going on. So what are your thoughts around that?
Thank you, Jamal. And yeah, this is basically the purpose of of our event today is to show that there are experiences in regions such as West Africa and East Africa where which we can benefit from. For example, the creation of POAs has allowed for a multitude of one of the key issues, the cost that was already mentioned earlier, and the cost, you can bring down the cost if you can generate volume, right? So you can, if you have enough activities, and the cost is basically doing the whole process of registration, MRV, all of that, can be distributed across many activities, and therefore these are experiences that have been acquired from other regions that we can bring into SIDS. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Further questions, comments? Yes, please.
Fiona Ryan, I'm sorry I jumped the gun on those ones before, but I think these are great initiatives. I mean, when I see the demand for these comes from the developed north, and they basically have a lot of scepticism about trying to meet their targets through international emissions trading. And so having initiatives like this will increase their confidence. I think there really needs to be a focus on contacting, well, basically influencing the attitudes of the people in developing north to think that, you know, these sort of Article 6 is not a way to circumvent carbon targets in their own countries. And so having work like this to give some structure and confidence in people that these things are real reductions in emissions or removals. Or so, yeah, I think it's really important that, because we know what happened with the CDM. There's a lot of discontent, a lot of resentment in developing countries because they did all this work on the CDM and the market collapsed. So that's a danger I see, and the way I see it is trying to influence the rich countries that Article 6 is a good thing that'll benefit everybody and will include the developing world in mitigation in a real way.
Thank you very much for your comments, and they are well recognized everywhere, and we understand that they need to be molded to each country's circumstances, and we definitely aim with the initiative and the tools to try to build that confidence that's lacking by setting safeguards and ensuring that what emission reductions are achieved from applying these methodologies are real and they are measurable. And so, yes, the Article 6 rulebook adopted lays down stringent principles, and now we are with the Article 6.4 supervisory body not making progress as fast as we would like to operationalize Article 6 and the market mechanisms therein. So, as a guidance for the first mover countries, we try to ensure that these tools are easily applicable and they can inform host governments when they decide on the transition of CDM activities and which methodology to approve and so forth. So definitely your comments are valid, and thank you for raising them.
Thank you very much. We are now nearing the end of our, yes, please, over there.
Thank you. Robin Lancaster, Quantum Commodity Intelligence. In one of your slides, Christian, you mentioned the potential for multi-country approaches that could scale up mitigation, particularly for small countries. I just wondered how that might work under the Article 6 architecture, and secondly, is it under discussion already?
Well, let me come in here. So we've had programmatic approaches under CDM multi-country POAs. There is nothing that would prevent such an approach under Article 6. One could easily have 6-2 collaborations for an entire region and coordinate this through regional mechanisms. For example, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, or in the Pacific through SPREP. So there is, I think, a lot of potential for innovation that lies around and could be harnessed. Good. I think we have no further questions, so I would like to thank you for joining us at our event. I'm really looking forward to seeing the small island states being active in Article 6. Those of you who like the topic, there is later today the Dominica side event, so that will feature a real pilot that is already being undertaken under the Swiss collaboration. So join us there if you like the topic. Thank you very much, and I thank all the presenters, including the virtual ones.